I'm Tracy, and when I was 13, my mom got pregnant. I was an only child, so I was very excited. But when my dad found out, he went nuts. He started throwing things everywhere and yelling at my mother. I thought he was going crazy, but then I heard him shouting that the baby wasn't his. My dad had a vasectomy after I was born, so that only meant one thing. Mom had cheated on him. Dad stormed into my parents' bedroom and started throwing things into a bag. He called out for me, but I was too afraid to go see him. He was so angry. When I didn't answer, he came into my room to talk to me. He said he wanted me to go with him, but I couldn't stay with someone who behaved like that. I said I was staying with Mom because she'd need help with the baby. Dad got really upset. He started crying and saying if I loved him, I'd take his side and stay with him, not take the side of someone who stabbed him in the back. I felt really uncomfortable. I was just a kid. How could I make that choice? Dad threatened that if I didn't go with him, that would be it. He'd cut all contact with me. I just sat there shaking my head, too upset to speak. His last words to me were, "I can't believe you chose to stay with that snake." I was in floods of tears as I watched him leave. I never saw him again. I went with my mother to all her doctor appointments, and I was there for her first scan. That's when we got a huge shock. Mom wasn't just pregnant. She was having triplets. I had no idea who the father of the babies was. Mom refused to talk about him. She just said she made a mistake and the guy didn't even know she was pregnant. Her pregnancy was rough. It's hard when you're having triplets. When Mom went into labor, she was forced to have an emergency C-section. She lost so much blood, she almost died. I felt so helpless. All I could do was sit in the waiting room crying as medics rushed past to help my mom. One of the nurses tried to make me feel better, but nothing she could say could make me stop worrying. I couldn't lose her. She was all I had. When they finally let me visit, she looked so pale and tired. But my 3 baby brothers were gorgeous. The second I held one of them in my arms, I was in love. Mom said, "Promise me that if anything ever happens to me, you'll look after your brothers." "You're being silly," I said. "Nothing's gonna happen to you." But I could tell it was important to my mom, so I promised I'd always be there for my brothers. Mom let me pick out names, and I called them Caleb, Christopher, and Conrad. After my brothers were born, life was hard. Mom suffered postnatal depression, which made it hard for her to look after the baby, so I did everything for them. Caleb's first word was Mom, but he said it to me. I tried to tell him I wasn't his mom, I was his sister, but he wouldn't stop calling me Mom, and soon all my brothers called me Mom as well. Mom wasn't too happy, but I have to say it was really cute. Even though I took care of my brothers, I still got good grades. When I was old enough, I applied to Harvard and got accepted. I was so happy, but I remembered that Mom and my brothers needed me, so I decided to go to community college instead. When Mom found out about it, she burst into tears. She didn't want me to give up my dreams because of her mistake, so I agreed to go to Harvard. But then there was a bigger obstacle. When my brothers realized I was leaving, they didn't take it very well. Caleb told me he was going to hold on to me forever, so I couldn't leave. So I suggested they all move to Massachusetts with me. We got an apartment near campus, so it was easy for me to get to classes. It was a whole new start for all of us. Mom was happier and she started taking care of us again. But one day, I was called out of class. When I went to the dean's office, there were 2 policemen waiting. They told me my mom had had a heart attack. She was in the hospital, but it wasn't looking good. I couldn't believe it. We were supposed to be building a new life together, not ending it. The police took me to the hospital where my mom was on life support. My brothers were already there, and I told them everything would be okay. But I don't think they believed me. I'm not religious, but I spent the next day and night praying. I'd do anything as long as Mom lived. I couldn't lose her. Mom didn't survive. That was the worst day of my life. I didn't just lose my mother, I lost all hope. What was the point of doing anything when you can lose it all in the blink of an eye? I wanted to take my brothers home with me, but it wasn't going to be easy. CPS said they should be in foster care. I said no way. We'd lost our mom. We couldn't lose each other. They said it was too much for someone my age to look after triplets, but I'd been taking care of them since they were born. Couldn't they see I knew what I was doing? I had to go to court, but eventually I was awarded full custody of the boys. I was their sister and their mom. Of course, I had to drop out of college. There was no way I could study and be there for my brothers. Family was more important than a college degree, even from Harvard. Mom had an insurance policy which was enough to keep us going for a while, but it wasn't going to last forever. I needed to find a job. But then one of my friends from Harvard called me. She said she worked for a freelance writing company and she wondered whether I was interested in writing for them. That's how I started my freelance career. I made enough money to pay the bills and I could stay home with my brothers instead of having to pay for childcare. For the next few years, we were a happy family. But one morning, I woke up feeling wiped out, like I hadn't slept. I was used to being tired all the time, but this was something else. It was hard getting out of bed. But I had to make sure my brothers got to school. As I made their breakfast, suddenly I was hit with a massive headache. "Are you okay?" asked Conrad. "I'm fine," I said, popping a couple painkillers, but they didn't help. In fact, my headache got worse and my vision went all blurry. Suddenly I collapsed. My head felt like it was split in two. I was in so much pain I thought I was going to die. Everything went black. I couldn't see. "Conrad, Christopher, Caleb," I shouted. "I need to go to the emergency room." I wanted to be strong for my brothers, but I was in agony. I couldn't see a thing as they helped me down the stairs to get a cab. Halfway down, I collapsed. They couldn't hold on to me, and I fell down the last few stairs. I was lucky not to break my neck. I was screaming in pain all the way to the hospital. My brothers were panicking, yelling at the driver to go faster. We rushed to the emergency room, and as soon as they saw me, they got me to an examination room. The doctor told me I had something called giant cell arteritis. It's when the arteries which support the optic nerve in the eye become inflamed, blocking the nerve so it can't get enough blood. "There's a cure, right?" I said. "You can give me a pill or something." "I'm sorry," the doctor said. "There's no cure. You're permanently blind." I felt like my world shattered into a million pieces. I couldn't be blind. I had to look after my brothers. I begged the doctor to do something. There had to be a cure. There just had to be. But the doctor said there was nothing he could do. My brothers came to visit me. Conrad said they brought me flowers so the smell would cheer me up, but it made me miserable. What's the point of smelling flowers you can't see? CPS put the triplets into foster care, but they couldn't find a family to take all three of them, so they were placed with separate families. It broke my heart to think of them all alone without me, to help them with their homework or talk through their problems. But what could I do? I was blind and useless. I thought things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. The doctors did a lot of tests on me when I lost my sight. They told me the reason I'd been so tired was because I had leukemia. If I didn't start treatment right away, I would be dead in 6 months. Of course I started treatment, but it was so stressful. All I could think about was how I was going to look after my brothers when I was out of the hospital. How could we pay our bills when I had to pay for chemotherapy? At last, the doctors said I could go home, but the thought of being out of the hospital filled me with dread. I had to prove to CPS again that I could look after my brothers, but I didn't know if I could. I was disabled and struggling to cope with being blind. I didn't have a job. The only reason I still had my apartment was because of my mom's insurance policy, but that money was running out. I went to meeting after meeting with CPS and pretended everything was fine, but inside, I was falling apart. The only thing that kept me going was the promise I'd made to my mom. But I couldn't help thinking they'd be better off without me. Eventually, CPS said the boys could come back to live with me, but I was worried they'd made the wrong decision. I cried all the time when my brothers were in school. I felt like my life was over. I was supposed to be a Harvard graduate in a well-paid job, not blind, unemployed, and struggling to raise 3 boys. One day, I was sitting on my bed, crying, when I heard Caleb say to me, What's wrong? Caleb, I gasped. You're supposed to be at school. Caleb told me he'd forgotten his homework, so he'd come back for it and found me like this. It all came flooding out. I told him about how I always wanted to be a writer, but now I was useless. You're not useless, said Caleb. He told me how much he loved me and said I could still be a writer. I could use software. I laughed and told him not to be stupid. We didn't have the money for the software I needed. So, Caleb said he'd do the typing for me. Every day, after he'd finished his homework, Caleb sat down with me to write my book. I'd always planned on writing the next big American novel, but Caleb told me I needed to write my autobiography. He'd said I was an inspiration. The last thing I felt like was an inspiration, but he was right. My life would make a good book. It took over a year of hard work, but at last, we had a book I was proud of. I sent it to a few publishers, but they all rejected it, so I published it myself. I didn't think anyone would buy it, but in that first month, I sold 1,000 copies. I had loads of 5-star reviews. People really loved it. Then, I had an email from a publishing company. They said they loved my book and wanted me to write another one for them. They offered me a huge advance. I'm finally a best-selling author, and that's why I wanted to make this film. If I can make my dreams come true, after everything I've been through, so can you. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and comment for even more stories.